Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've just been to see Morbius, which is the third in Sony's Spider-Man universe, the sort of subsidiary universe to Marvel. These films are made in association with Marvel, because Sony bought these characters way back when. They made the original Spider-Man movies back in the early 2000s with Sam Raimi. And then Marvel later decided it wanted to make its own movies, but it never had the rights to Spider-Man. And I'm guessing these characters came with it. That's why they're still Sony's.
Right.
But, you know, money is too big a deal to fight over, and so they've agreed that, you know, they're going to make all these movies together because money. So the first two were Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage. We liked Venom. We didn't like Venom Let There Be Carnage, which we saw not that long ago. This is basically Venom again, except it's got some Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in it, a bit of Batman, it's a vampire thing. Alright, so Jared Leto is a doctor. Initially he's a very, very young boy with a blood condition that we don't get all that much information on, but he has to have 3 blood transfusions a day. It cripples him. He's walking with sticks. He's got a young friend, English lads. They grow up together. Milo is, as an adult, played by Matt Smith. And he has the same condition. He's crippled and very weak, and they seem very close to death. He's also very, very wealthy and kind of bankrolls this secret research that Michael Morbius is doing. Michael Morbius is a doctor, and he's brilliant. We see that from the start. He's introduced as such. He's
won a Nobel Prize.
He's just won a Nobel Prize as well when he's older. But still, all this research he's doing on how to save himself is off the books. He does some DNA research. He manages to splice bat DNA into his own cells, which means that... Oh, it's anticoagulant, that's it. So it must be a blood clotting thing. His blood clots all the time, so this thing stops him from clotting. But the side effect is he also becomes a vampire. He needs to feed on blood. Luckily, he's invented artificial blood, which they said could never be done, so well done. But the effect of the artificial blood, when he drinks it, is wearing off, and pretty soon he's going to have to drink the human stuff. So he's very worried about that, because he's got a conscience. His mate Milo, on the other hand, gets his hands on the same serum, and is not so concerned with the well-being of others. So when I say it's like Venom in that the villain is a version of the main guy.
Yes.
You know, which Venom did, which Hulk did. It happens quite a lot in superhero things, to be honest.
There's quite a lot of Hulk moments in this film.
Yes, there's transformed.
I am the Hulk.
Yeah, in fact, he says you wouldn't like me when I'm hungry at one point, which is such a direct joke on it. You said, you know, the reviews have been very bad.
Yes.
I said from the trailers, I think this looks like a big pile of poo.
Well, we were both right. I mean, it is pretty terrible. I mean, my view is that even the worst movies have, you know, redeeming value or reasons to see it. And I think this is true of this movie as well. Mm-hmm. You know, because I think for me, the discovery of this movie is how much fun Matt Smith is to watch. You know, and the difference between him and Jared Leto. I mean, every time Matt Smith is on screen, you know, there's an energy and he's doing something and he's being both villainous and watchable, right? He's always doing something interesting, either with his body posture or his face or, he's giving a performance. Whereas, you know, Jared Leto seems to be just hoping the camera picks up something.
I think the opposite, really. I've liked Matt Smith since we saw him in Last Night in Soho, which I think was a bit of a revelation to the both of us.
Yes.
Because I don't know that we were that familiar with his work on TV.
I don't watch Doctor Who, so I didn't know him from anything.
I don't watch Doctor Who, and I've not seen anything else he'd been in. I think he might have been in like a Broadchurch type show, something like that. You know, one of the ITV crime things set on a windy beach. Anyway, not seen anything of him before, and it was a real revelation to find how charismatic he was in the Edgar Wright film. Here, I think he's trying to bring some of that. But I think too much of it is clouded by turning into a CGI head. You know?
Oh, well, I think the CGI head is a problem. There's no question. I think that's a misjudgment of the film with him and with Jared Leto. You know, I think it's one of the stupid decisions that, you know, Jared Leto must take some of the blame from because he's listed as an executive producer. Mm-hmm. But it's a huge misjudgment in a film like this, you know, to have several attractive stars and to be constantly showing them at their worst, right? So, you know, Jared Leto is painful to watch during the whole first third of the film, because until he becomes a vampire, he's meant to be weak and his skin is blotchy and, but actually it means it is kind of unpleasant to watch, really.
I disagree with that.
Okay.
I disagree with that. See, on the CGI head stuff, I think we're in agreement that it clouds the performances, and even though there is a purpose to it, these guys are transforming into these vampires.
There are other ways of doing it.
Well, it's too often, and you don't get to feel the performance underneath it. But as for the start, when Jared Leto in particular is weak and desiccated and sunk and everything, I found him extremely endearing and likable, and the performance was part of it as well.
No, I don't agree. I thought he was dull beyond measure.
I really liked him.
I thought he was dead, in fact.
In fact, because I mentioned, I put on Twitter just the 3 words: Morbius is shit. Like, that's sort of enough, really. And a friend, Leanne, said, I do have low Leto tolerance, hence I'm going to swerve it. And I said, I think I have low Leto tolerance as well. But actually, I like him in everything I see him in.
Yes, I don't have...
There's something about the idea of him that doesn't appeal. But actually, I think he's perfectly lovely all the time.
I mean, I really liked him in Gucci.
House of Gucci.
And I don't agree with all the performances about like the prosthetics and so on. I think what's extraordinary is that he gave an extraordinarily original, I think, performance through the prosthetics that not many people could have done. He really did become a different person. But the performance lay in what emotion is conveyed, what effects are achieved, whether he got laughs or not, and he's very successful at hitting all of those spots. So I'm a fan. But I think this is very dull, and he's very dull in it. And I think those decisions are a mistake. You have the star of a film, which is going to be quite dark anyway. You don't need to show his face like that. I mean, his body should be enough to show how incapacitated he is. Yeah, kind of. Why do you have to, not give the audience the pleasure of the beauty of the performer?
I disagree with that. I think you sometimes do over-focus on how we want to see beautiful people on screen looking beautiful. I think there's something really, really expressive about the way he looks in this.
Well, we disagree. Because I didn't think it was expressive. I thought it was kind of unpleasant to watch. It was meant to be in contrast to his beefed up moment later on, which I didn't quite like that either. But I think the biggest thing is, to me, he's dull. There's a kind of an earnestness about the whole of the performance. Yeah, there's no wit in it at all. And I think actually that is in real contrast to Matt Smith, who, kind of instantly brings in this energy and this sexiness and this wit, and he's doing something with the character, right? Whereas with Jared Leto, I think there's this methody, intensity, but that never really bubbles up to the surface. And I do think that there is this thing where the actor, there might be all this kind of, internal turmoil going on, but you can't rely on the camera to pick it up because it's not picking it up, or at least as far as I'm concerned, it didn't register with me. I thought it was really dull, a dull performance.
Fair enough.
And the difference, sorry to interrupt, and the contrast is with Tom Hardy, because I think in many ways, the Venom films in this are...
Oh, they're so similar. They're also about, I'm a good person, but there's a thing inside of me that needs to feed on people.
Exactly. So what makes the difference is the charge and the charisma and the beauty and so on that Tom Hardy brings to that performance. And I think that's what we should be comparing Jared Leto to, because that is what's missing. It is kind of, it's quite earnest, the performance, and maybe well-meaning and maybe methodical, but I really found it dull.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly not everything it could be, and you're right to compare it to Tom Hardy and Venom, which is everything that you said, and we really liked it. I mean, this film lacks all of the charm that Venom had, which it totally had, is not present here. No. It wants to be taken very seriously. It's quite dark. Occasionally, that's kind of effective, but I think it relies too heavily on Matt Smith for its laughs and for its charm, and I don't think he's successful in bringing it out. Well,
I think he's successful, but I think there's only so much he can do, right? Because the film is so empty on every other level.
Yeah.
It's, it's thematically poor. It's kind of visually embarrassing, right? It's kind of, it's what everybody who doesn't like Marvel films accuse Marvel films of being. Yeah. It's just thin and underdeveloped and over-reliant on effects and action, to give whatever pleasures the film aims to give. It has no depth of any kind, no texture of any kind. It's really, I think, the poorest effort I've seen in Marvel films.
Yes, or Marvel, excuse me, Marvel adjacent, because it's not full on proper official Marvel.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, whatever.
It's this Sony side universe. I would say it felt like it was over quickly for me. It's an hour and 3/4 long, which is perfectly long enough for a movie. It's not like it is short, but I think the reason that it felt like it was over quickly was that by the time it finishes, it still feels like the film has hardly got going. It's like it's telling this origin story the whole way through, but it never feels like it hits a satisfactory third act.
No.
And the final fight between Leto and Smith is so quick. It's not like a proper... I mean, it should be. I guess it's trying to be. We're going into the subway tunnels, and we've seen, if you've been paying attention to the news ticker, that there are these bats in there, and the bats have become Jared Leto's friend and everything. So, it's building to this big climax. It's trying to be. But it's over very, very quickly with Leto, having formulated some anti-serum that will kill Matt Smith, and he gets it in him very quickly, and in a way that's a blessing, because I didn't want much more of it. I mean, but it was bizarre how quickly it's like, oh, that's it.
It was so badly done, because the whole film hangs on these two boys being lifelong friends. That one was the protector of the other. That they're beholden to each other. That their fates are tied together. And then, the Matt Smith character is killed off without any
shedding of a tear.
Yeah, I mean, it should have been a hugely emotional moment, right? And an internal struggle. Why are you killing the person you love most all your life, right? Yeah, it should have been a kind of, an ethical kind of contest, a moral struggle, No,
it's devoid of all of that, and really, 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 really rather dumb. And when they kill the female doctor character, what's the actress's name? Adria Arjona. She's from Puerto Rico.
Yes.
She's the doctor who helps Morbius out, and they're obviously attracted to each other, and then she dies, and again, they're trying to go for some emotion there, it's not emotional enough. But then, because he sucks on her blood, he feasts on her blood, that's when he accepts that I'm going to have to drink human blood, and Matt Smith's there to applaud him and say, welcome to the world of the vampires, and so on. You're thinking, well, I was thinking at least, is she gone, or is it a vampire thing, and is she going to come back to life? And right at the end, her eyes open, and she's clearly been vampirized. But then you're thinking, all the other people that we've seen get sucked to death, they're coming back now?
Because there's a difference between being sucked dry, and then what happened, but the film handles it so poorly. What happens is that a drop of blood...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, drops...
falls from his mouth.
From his mouth onto hers. Right? But then what didn't make sense to me is... So then she revives a little bit, and then he sucks her dry, doesn't he?
Does she revive then?
Well, her eyes open or whatever, right? And he sucks her dry.
Right. Well, but she writes it right at the end of the film in a shot that is disconnected from everything else.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it's the second to last shot.
All right.
So that says she's going to be back.
Okay, good, because I thought, so I missed that. There was, so there is a payoff there but actually that moment still didn't make sense to me. So, the blood falls, you see it go on her lips, and then he eats her up or sucks her dry, more like.
Yeah, well, he has to feed. He has to feed.
I know, but there should have been something in between.
Yes, right. It should have been more. He cries over her and everything, and then he accepts that she's dead, and so he feeds on her because he needs to feed. I guess that's what it is.
Anyway, the film is so bad on so many different levels. I thought the exposition of the powers that he's got. So the film makes this very poor attempt at dramatizing a growing awareness of what Morbius's powers are.
Because he's learning about them too.
But at the end of the film, I'm still not quite clear on what they are. Right?
Yeah, well, the echolocation is explained, in dialogue. He says, I'm developing echolocation like a bat. Yeah. And as long as you have a reasonable understanding what echolocation is, it's very easy to interpret what he's saying. Yeah, he can hear very well, basically. The flying thing, not very well explained, because it's not quite that he can fly, but when there's
wind currents.
Right, it seems to be about wind currents and him noticing and feeling them being able to fly off on them. So it's not exactly flight, but it's more like active gliding, it seems to be, that he has.
Yeah.
difficult to tell. The way it visualizes, something that I did like, is when he transforms, and sometimes he kind of transforms partially into a vampire when these powers are becoming active, but he's not fully, going vampire. His eyes change, the pupils, and they become...
I like that, but I thought the film could have done something more...
Maybe.
Dramatic and beautiful with that.
Maybe, but I did like it. And you see the world start to kind of... It doesn't even become fluid, it becomes like gaseous. So the world that he's looking at, all these tower blocks and everything in wherever he is, New York, they start to have like gaseous waves coming out of them and flowing and things. And it does, I think, convey this idea of how significantly the powers are changing him and affecting, not just affecting like what he can do, but how he perceives the world. He perceives the world differently when he can do different things in it.
Sure.
I think it's quite pretty and quite effective.
Well, yes. Up to a point. I mean, I did think that demonstrating that liquidness or gaseousness in the action scenes itself, I found really distracting because you couldn't see the action very well.
Yes.
And also, what I didn't like or understand was at some point he realizes he's got control over bats. Right? And you think, well, if he's got control over bats, why doesn't Matt Smith?
Yeah. Maybe Matt Smith just hasn't realised it. He hasn't had bats in his room. But I agree. It's yeah.
But anyway, I mean, this is even giving the film more respect than it does. I mean, there's a moment where I poked you because, I think in the first 10 minutes of film, you realize everything was so poorly filmed. Like, there were close-up shots with like half of the forehead missing, right? And you think, why? Like, you could have at least, kind of framed the head properly. There's no reason for the forehead to be missing, right? Like, and you would get like lots of shots like that in a way that just seemed like kind of ugly and unpleasant and like thoughtless and careless.
I must say, you drew my attention to that shot, which is in the hospital early on, and it's the female doctor's head, which is framed with, the forehead is at the top of the frame. You drew my attention to that, and I didn't really see what you would... I kind of got it, but then nothing else occurred to me in the rest of the film that was framed like egregiously badly like that. So I just don't agree with that, I think.
Well, I saw tons of examples, and the reason why that was poorly framed is not, I mean, you can frame somebody with half the forehead missing, if then, like, I don't know, it's a tight close-up or whatever. But this was weird in the sense that half the forehead was missing, but then you saw her chest, right? So there was lots of room in the shot. You could have just kind of, shown her full head. It seemed like lazy and careless, and it was part of a pattern. By the time I nudged you, there had been like several examples of those choices, and you think, why?
Well, fair enough. I'll accept your judgment.
And I do think it's a very poorly designed and poorly shot film. I mean, it's terrible. The most striking shots to me in the film were actually just kind of, simple ones where the screen is divided in three and you see red and then like the back of someone is just a shadow. And you think, okay, that's kind of, visually interesting in its most basic form. It's just something that, you could draw in a comic book, right? And like a simple pattern. And that's about the most interesting shots in the film. The rest was like piss poor, really.
I like the sequence where the doctor is walking down the hall at night.
Oh, I thought that was storybook,
well, it's
simple as well.
It could, as it develops, it could be more effective. But at the start, really, I thought quite creepy. She's walking down, and as she walks down the hall, lights subsequently turn on and turn off. And because the thing is, it's not realistic because as if these are motion activated lights to save power, you would not turn them off like so that there's complete darkness. You'd wait for the next one to go on before the last one goes off. But that's the way it works in this, right? Each one goes off, then the next one comes on. And in those moments of darkness, there's someone going around the background. And also the way that they move, when they're in vampire form, they move extremely quickly. And when you see it at that distance, that is quite, it's like when you see, like you see a spider at the corner of your eye and it's just going, it's like that, right? Has that creepiness. Also, I liked when, in the similar thing, when early on, Jared Leto has just sort of become a vampire for the first time, I think, and now he's turning back into his disabled, broken, crippled self. There are a couple of I think the performance is good because it's partly performance in that his legs go out from underneath him and it's very convincing, and he starts kind of losing control of his body. But there are definitely one or two moments that are enhanced by computer editing where a joint moves very, very quickly, far too quickly for him to have acted it, and there's an unnaturally quick progression of his worsening condition, which I think again I really liked. It's only a moment, but I did like that.
Well, I agree that the scene in the hallway is one of the best scenes in the film. Mm-hmm. I still think it's really basic and textbook, and that is just a commentary on how bad all the rest of the films are. When you think of the set pieces, the one on the boat, right, or the one where he follows the forgers to set up his new headquarters. When you think how a better director would have made something out of the locations even, right, much less the action, and everything here seems like just inexpert, unskilled, really.
Yeah, actually worse than Venom 2, which is amazing. That was really bad.
Yes.
And actually, the director of this, Daniel Espinosa, his last film was Life, which was that alien thing set on a spaceship where like a little bit of alien goo. In fact, because people kind of thought, this might be like a prequel to Venom, because it's this alien goo that just gets out on a spaceship and starts killing people, and then it winds up coming to Earth. Spoilers. And people thought, wouldn't it be great if that turned out to be like how the goo from Venom got onto Earth? And it's not, right? It is a very... Because I watched it again not long ago, actually, and there are so many differences between that and everything, and that and the Spider-Man stuff, that it could never have been that. But it was a really effective little, claustrophobic space sci-fi horror, right? This has none of the imagination, none of the expressions, none of the shock or anything like that had.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was unskilled.
Yeah.
And I also thought, just the last thing, because the film also has Jared Harris, who, I think is so great, and every time he's on, he brings something alive. Though, of course, his role is a nothing, and he's given nothing to do. So it just feels like, even though he does bring a spark of life every time he's on, you feel he's wasted. Yeah.
Did you notice that the boat that they do the pivotal experiment on was called the Murnau?
No. Yes. Well, it makes sense. Yeah. But yes, if you
very clever.
If you don't have the skill or the imagination, reference something.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So a huge pile of shit.
Yes. I liked Matt Smith. I was very disappointed in Jared Leto, and the film is really bad.
Jared Leto, I just think, I want to kiss him, and that makes me feel very uncomfortable.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye. Jared Leto is gorgeous.
He is. But actually, I don't think... I mean, to me, this is really proof he's not a film star. Because, there were moments where I was thinking, oh my God, I just want this to end. Right? And, he is very beautiful, and I think he's a very good actor. And yet, I was bored watching him. Yeah? And you think almost, well, that is the test of a star.
He's your favourite Joker? Is he still your favourite Joker?
I really liked him as a Joker, but no, my favourite Joker would have to be Heath Ledger, I think.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Who was the one just...
No, Jack Nicholson. Are you kidding? I love Jack Nicholson.
Don't ask me if I'm kidding. I didn't say anything. Who was the one just recently that we saw? The Barry Keoghan in the new one, yeah. He looks like he'll be quite exciting. Because they've really gone back to the Conrad Wright thing that inspired the Joker in the first place. Yes. So that's going to be interesting.
Yes, I must say, I think every Joker has
something.
Even Cesar Romero.
I do feel like we're getting into Joker fatigue now because they keep on fucking doing it.
Yes.
At a rate of knots.
I kind of think there's almost like a superhero fatigue, really. I think they've got to figure out a new way of doing these films.
Also, did you say in Dallas Buyers Club that Jared Leto should be more beautiful and less desiccated?
No.
Or did you show respect?
No, but that's a very different kind of role, right? Like, you know, this is the central performance in a commercial film. He's cast as a star for a reason. Yeah, I think there are kind of, and I'm not just being superficial. I really do think, you know, that kind of these things are important in film. So I think there's a difference when you're playing like a supporting part, and really it's kind of like an acting turn as like this, you know, drag queen who dies of AIDS that calls on for different things. Then, you know, you are meant to be Morbius. I mean, you have to bring kind of, you know, charisma and beauty and energy and, yeah, kind of to the role, even when you're playing, you know, a vampire. Yeah, like, and actually, if you think about it, like, kind of, you know, almost everyone who's played, you know, a vampire, yeah, kind of has brought in those things, from Tom Cruise, Antonio Banderas, Brad Pitt, even Klaus Kinski, or, you know, I forget who the original Nosferatu was. I mean, actually, he looked like a rat, but, you know, but again, he was the villain of the piece. Here, you know, he's the hero, right? So I do think that...
Max Schreck, of course.
Max Schreck, yes. I do think that, you know, when you see him with his sunken skin, and also, you know, the freckles, but they look like liver spots, and actually it looks almost too realistic. I mean, it is just very unattractive, yeah?
Fair enough. I like that. I also like the way the CGI... yeah, I think we're in agreement that overall its heavy use detracts from the performances, but I do like the way that when you see it in transformation from man to vampire, it eats into the face.
I like that. I'd like that, actually, but I just wish that would have been a moment, right? Like, yeah, kind of a second of transition or something, you know, but then to have that look stay so often on the film, on the screen, well, I thought, as you said, it detracts from the performances. It's unattractive to see. It doesn't bring anything more expressive to it, you know.
It's just a badly conceptualized film throughout, basically. Like it needs going back to a first, what's it, a page one rewrite, whatever they call it.
Yes.
To start again.
And also, what Marvel films are accused of is, you know, that they're garbage, right? So they're thin, right? It's just like kind of all these cheap effects and action sequences, but really the films offer you nothing, which I think is wrong. Right, like, you know, some of the films are better and some of the films are worse. But the best films are textured and, yeah, they have depth. And, you know, I think, what's the one set in Africa? Black Panther, you know, I think it's great. Right. This is really what people who hate Marvel films say Marvel films are like. It's thin, you know, it's not thought through. It's kind of thematically slack and loose. It has no depth, you know, though it's, you know, it has a surface struggle between right and wrong, but really that's banal. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of, we can't beat a dead horse anymore. It's like terrible.